Yeah. Do you have
Hmm?
you have editing capacity?
Yes, I do.
Sweet. All right.
So we can, if there's something in there that you say, put it out, then
Ah, yeah. I usually don't. I don't think I ever have yet with
I
that, but it's more like just for yourself when I just ramble too much or just refuse to answer your question.
well,
Like,
that's just who you are, right? So let's keep it all in.
so it's not because I'm an asshole. It's the ADHD thing. I think 'cause I often start out with the intention of answering the question, but
Mhm.
I feel like I need to background it with something else first, and then I get lost and forget what I was talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah, yeah. I know that problem. I know that problem.
Mm.
So yeah, keeping that question in the front of your head. Okay, so do you want me to frame it a little bit?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Um, so I've started writing this series of blog posts in January, and they're going through three phases. First, about deep alignment, which I call aligning your system one, your intuitive, fast acting part of your brain, which you don't really have access to, with your system two, which wants to structure and plan and do things, right?
Mm.
And usually they're not very aligned because some people in your childhood configured the contents of your system one, and their system ones were configured when they were children, etc. And it goes all the way down the line, and nobody's really doing anything in any real conscious way. So,
Mm.
so breaking that cycle is what I call deep alignment. So that was the
Nice.
first couple of months. And with every post, there was a conversation, and these conversations were recorded and transcribed and all put into a Rome graph. Do you know Rome at all?
No.
It's an amazing, it's a really cool tool. Let me share my screen. Let me prepare this quick. Let me share my screen to show you what this actually does. Um, are you familiar with Niklas Luhmann by any chance? A
No.
social scientist from Germany. Um, he came up with something he called the his second brain, and the second
Ah.
brain was a bunch of um, notes, paper notes in boxes that he had a system how to link them with each other, and
Right.
he could use those to write his books. And Rome
Okay.
is doing something similar in the digital space. So all of these nodes here are either people or concepts or something like that. And
Oh, I have seen this.
and and um,
Yeah.
and so there are conversations between people, and they're recorded, and then there's a transcript, and so all of that is linked with everything else.
Oh, wow.
And
Nice.
and so after deep alignment, we went into future articulation, so coming up with a shared picture of the future. And now I'm beginning to reach out to people of trying to understand how we can start building towards that future. That's the third phase, meaning that's what I call steering adaptation. Um, and the picture of the future that we somehow
The
have.
turd phase.
Third,
Turd phase. That
third
sounds like
phase.
number two. Number two, not number three. Hey, hey. Sorry, man. It's late.
Okay, all good. So, so, so we what you're familiar with the Civium ideas of Jordan Hall, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's somehow adjacent to that in the sense that we believe that living in small communities between 1,000 and 4,000 people uh, is probably the way to go, either forced by the planet or consciously, better
Yep.
consciously. Um, and then if we have that, still have that, connect all of these little parts of people with each other globally through communications and logistics networks in a virtual
Mm.
space, right?
Mm.
Um, to make sense globally are you familiar with Jeffrey West's work of scaling?
Yeah.
So it makes sense bringing people into bigger communities as well, but we don't have to lump them all
Only when you figure out how to get a decent power law going.
a
For the
decent
scale though.
a decent what going?
Power law.
Power law, yeah.
Yeah,
So
the
so
power law's got to be. It has to be. All right, so your system has to be patterned well enough on the natural systems where there's a high power law.
mhm, mhm.
You know,
Totally agree, and that has
yeah,
to.
where you're gaining 25% efficiency when you double. You know, with your
Mhm.
natural systems and your indigenous systems, but all the other systems, all the tinkered ones, you're lucky to get 15.
That's true.
He
So
kind of de-emphasized that fact in his book, but it was there when he was mapping out the figures for it, and I was like,
mhm,
yeah, well, that's the problem right there. You know,
mhm.
it's hardly worth scaling if you're only going to save 8 or 10%.
But
You know, you
even
want to
even
make sure you've got some decent systems in place first.
that's true. But even then, there's some things that on the social level that break down if you double, right? Um,
Yeah,
so
that's it.
so if you double your community, after a while you will lose connection, and
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure there's a power law attached to that too.
yeah,
So
yeah. You
the,
increase patents and heroin addicts.
exactly.
Yeah.
So 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 the question I would like to focus our conversation around today is your perspective on how the world can relearn how to
Mm,
live with the land. The way you call it the lore of the land. When I try to do a like a quick pitch on the way you describe it, I usually tell people that um, sea land creates sea people, stone land creates stone people, right? So if you
mm,
actually live with the land, there's this culture that emerges out of that.
mm.
Um, but the question is, how do we actually relearn that as humans who have been sitting in cities for so long?
Mm.
And only a small portion of humans, but everybody else wants to go to the city because it's a sink of attraction. And how do we relearn that? How do we make that more fun again? That is what I would love to explore with you.
Sweet. So it could be said that you're making a list.
Hmm?
You're making a list of conversations.
I'm making a list of conversation. I'm making a
Yeah,
web of so it's Schindler's Web. Yes.
yeah. Schindler's Web. Nice. A kind of a Game B arc.
Hmm.
Nice.
Correct.
Yeah. And so you're quite involved with Jordan Hall there
No,
with the
I'm
Civium
I'm
and
I'm
everything
not
else,
at all
or
involved with Jordan. I'm very involved with Jim.
Jim? Okay. So
Yeah.
was it him who I can't remember who first said your name to me, and either
I don't know.
introduced us or said, "Oh, you've got to
I
talk to
don't
this
know.
guy."
I don't know who first said it. But
Yeah.
you I don't know if you still remember because you're probably on endless calls. We were on a call together around what we call the Pirate Academy, which is going to launch very soon.
That's
Um,
it. That's
uh,
it. I knew it.
and you
Yeah.
said the most incredible sentence at the end. I don't know if you came up with it spontaneously, but you said, maybe the invisible hand of the market is actually a cock.
That was I think that was the first time I said that. I've said it like 20 times since then. It's my favorite thing. I don't even say, like, I just drop it into the conversation. I'll be
Yeah, yeah,
talking with a very serious economist,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
I'll say, the invisible prick of the marketplace, you know. And just, uh, I don't
yeah.
know. I don't have enough of a sense of self-preservation to avoid doing that, and
Well,
I enjoy watching that uncomfortable moment where their eyes glaze over and
yeah, I'm not entirely sure whether that's really productive, but I totally,
it's not.
totally resonate with that urge. Yes.
It's my compensation for all these hours at the screen. I've got to have a little bit of fun from time to time.
Yeah, true.
I'm such a bully in these things.
That's good.
I, I'm different on the on the screen, like on a computer. It's I'm like I cut people off. I just cut you off again. See, like I can't help myself, and it's
You
really
don't
really
do that in
funny.
person,
No,
really?
no, only
Okay,
with the people I love.
okay. So I feel loved now. That's good.
But it's really funny. There's that intimacy where I don't feel the need to be overwhelmingly polite.
Mm,
But it is funny. It's sort of like I watch it back and I'm cringing sometimes. I think, God, I'm really Yeah, he's bullying people there, And it was really funny. There was this one session where it was like, four settlers on a panel, like all, Anglo, pale skin sort of people, and and I did about 50% of the talking for that whole thing.
mm.
And I
I
just completely, like, I kept cutting them off and going over the top of them. And then somebody sent in a complaint that these white people were were like shutting down the voice of this indigenous person. And I was like, are you mad? Did you see it? It was completely the opposite.
but I noticed that you're totally right. I noticed that on your podcast. Yeah, there was one you did with a lady. I'm not
Yeah.
entirely sure who that was. I don't remember now. But it was I was thinking to myself, dude, let her speak.
Yeah,
And
let her finish the story.
yeah.
But I don't know if you saw. I know the one you were talking about, but you'll see. I don't know. Towards the end, you might see why
Mhm,
I wanted to make it work for it.
okay.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, there was just there was some issues that I was sort of struggling with what she was doing. I felt like we resolved them towards the end, but I
Okay.
didn't want her to rush through the story and put off any indigenous listeners.
Okay.
You know what I
I,
mean? Like she had to get there first.
yeah,
Anyway.
yeah. No,
Yeah,
I
but I
didn't
still do
watch it
that a
today.
lot.
Yeah.
I do it a lot. I have listened back to a few lately, and I'm like, oh shit,
But
I
you
gotta
have
like.
the whole stage today. I don't need to talk any at all.
I
So
think that's why though. There's been too many of these things where it's been all
ah,
about me, and
okay.
so then I keep doing that.
Well,
Yeah,
but unfortunately today it's also going to be about your views, at least, on
yeah.
this question. Um, so to make this a little bit more concrete, um, in which European city do you have the most friends?
Oh, I don't even know.
Okay, pick one.
Pick one. I don't know. They're kind of scattered everywhere. Like um, I don't know. What's the big
Do you
one
know
in
Berlin? Do you know Berlin? Do you
What's
know
the
people?
big one in Denmark? Yeah, I've got a
Copenhagen.
couple of Palestinian friends in Berlin.
Copenhagen in
Yeah,
Denmark.
Copenhagen. A couple of people there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now imagine you're hanging there and you're trying to figure out how to bring across your ideas of the lore of the land to people who are living in a city, who have been living in a city their whole life.
All right.
Where would you start?
Water.
Water, okay. Why?
Um, well, that's the first. That's the first thing you do when you're reading country. That's the foundational knowledge. There is the water on every
Mhm.
landscape, even in the desert. If you don't understand the topography and you don't understand that idea of seeing a bird's eye view almost
Mhm.
of yourself within a landscape. Yeah, until you know where that water it will run if it falls there. So you've got to imagine the water falling there and then look to where that would go. And you have to follow that.
Mhm. And it's also life, right? I mean, that's the next to oxygen, the most important thing we have to put into our bodies to function.
Yeah. It's that, and I mean, it's all the abstract ideas about it, and all the poetry that everybody writes about it for sure. Um, but it's just it's what water is in relation to land. You know,
Hmm.
in a lot of ways, it shapes land,
Hmm.
but land also shapes where it goes. So you're yeah, if you understand where the water will run where you're standing, then and you follow that for a
Hmm.
bit, you'll see a lot of things.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and you know, if you're aware of your directions, you know, and where the sun is and where it was and where it will be, and you know, and you're following that water and observing that, then you'll start to see things, because a lot of the animals, birds, etc., are following the same thing,
Hmm.
following that same path, and so then you're moving with the landscape there. Um, because a lot of your seeds, when they fall, they'll get washed along that way as well, and you
Okay.
sort of see the edge of the place, like the edge that's in the place. And if it's not there, if it's a ruined place, then you'll see where the edge should be,
Mhm.
the liminal stuff, and you'll
Ah,
get a
so
sense for a feeling for underground water then too. And when you start to feel for that underground water, then you're really moving.
okay. And okay, so even if you have a damaged place and or are in a damaged place, and then you could sense where the edges should be, and hence know where you could start with the healing.
Yeah, that's it.
Hmm.
Because it's a bit of an illusion that these places are flat.
Hmm.
You think when you're in a city that you're standing on a flat space,
Hmm.
but it seldom is. And if you start to really pay attention, you'll see there are ripples, there's ridges, there's basins.
Hmm.
It's tilted.
Hmm.
It's always tilted slightly,
Hmm.
and then you know where to go.
Okay, so you follow the water, and so if I do that, what's the space you imagine? Is it like, do you walk for days, or is it something you do in a day, or do you have to live there for months, or how's that process?
Well, you have to eat, and
Hmm.
in order to eat and be sheltered, you have to work
Hmm.
at least a third of your life. So you got to sleep for another third, and then for much of the third that's left, you're doing life maintenance tasks, and then you're a bit tired and you're gonna have to rest. So I guess if it's just that hour, I mean, if anyone's got a spare hour, because then you got to exercise too, or you're gonna die,
Hmm.
10 years earlier than you should have. 20 or 30 if you're male.
Yeah, but walking
there's
walking
there's
the
plenty
land.
of there's plenty of like old fat ladies, but there's not a lot of old fat dudes. You know, except for Brian Dennehy.
Well,
He's
who is
doing
it?
all right. Yeah, although I reckon he's been on a Subway diet or something lately. But anyway, yeah, I guess it's about that awareness,
Mhm.
and just doing that. I think if you went out on like a little quest for it and everything, then maybe I don't know if that would work. I've never tried that, but it's just something that I let come into my awareness whenever I have the opportunity, when I'm just out walking,
Okay.
to go somewhere, or I find myself outside while I'm in the city. That's it is the first thing all right. So I'll tell you the story. First thing I did when I
Yeah.
got here, I think it was about 3 years ago, a bit more, when I first got to the city, and it was nearby here, and I had no idea where I was, and so I walked straight out on the street, and I stood and I looked for a while. I looked and saw where the ridge was, where the next ridge was. It's all concrete and bitumen,
Mm.
fairly flat, but I can see that ridges in the landscape.
Mhm.
And then I looked to see what trees were growing. Not very many, just planted ones here and there, mostly European trees, foreign trees. But I'm looking at
Mm.
how they're growing, and then that same species, and looking at the different color leaves, like and where the branches are reaching to, and a lot of different signs. Pigeons, what the pigeons are doing. the possum scat that you can see around the place, tracks where the urban foxes have been running at night. Like there's 1,000 things like that you start to see. And so I just, I started to follow the water, and I knew which way I had to go. And so, I walked for about half an hour, and I came to a place that had really strong underground water, and I could feel that coming up through my feet. And so then I kept going, and there's this little park there in the middle of all this devastation. There's a little park that had all these spirit trees. What you call it's a particular kind of tree here. She oak tree, and that tends to grow right on that. And then I see the sign that says Mullenbull, and Mullenbull's means like a pond with reeds. And you could see this sort of this basin and a whole heap of it didn't have water in it, but there were a lot of reeds and grasses. And then you could really see in the grass with that different color where the water was running. And you can go and stand on that in that place, and then go up, and you can usually find a powerful place in that. So I'm looking at the trees, and I'm sort of seeing where all the sort of patterning of where the branches of the trees are reaching to. And you sort of see a pattern in the end where all the trees around will be pointing towards one spot. So you just go and stand there and let your feet just be in the ground, and let that powerful spirit from that water deep in the ground just come up through you. And the place will open up to you, because then if you are open to what we call country, so, the land, then the land will show you things. And if you've got really no good intentions, or you're sort of closed off or too much in yourself, the land won't show you anything. And so pretty soon, chitcharak, 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 all these little willy wagtails come around, little black and white birds, and they're doing their little dance. And then all these little different things happen, and it's like that country sort of brings you in. And that's just kind of how that works.
Okay, very interesting. So by following the water, by tuning in with, by following the water, you tune in with nature.
Yeah. And even in a dry place, like you follow where the water would go if it landed there. Yeah.
Because somewhere you will end up finding some, even if it's underground or.
Yeah.
And then you do that because, and you see more life because all other life does the same thing, essentially.
Yeah. And you're also tapping into, I guess, an evolutionary pattern in yourself as an organism.
Okay.
As something that, has a good million years under its belt for walking and looking for water.
I once saw these mirror webs from Manhattan, actually, where there used to be watering holes, and to this day you can still track roughly where they were and how the different species used to migrate between the watering holes. It's a beautiful image. I can try and find it if you're interested, and send it over.
Yeah, that'll make a great AR.
Actually,
augmented reality.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. Okay. So I'll look for that later. I'll send it. And now, so now you're this single person walking around, identifying that, tuning into nature. How do you bring other people into this awareness?
It's funny because sometimes they just won't come. All you can do is be in it. I don't know. So, like for example, you can't bring your opposite sex spouse Like I think if you have a same-sex spouse, you can bring them into it. But if you've got opposite-sex spouse, there's a pride issue. So if a woman's trying to bring a man into
Hmm.
bring her man into it, he's going to have a pride issue of not wanting to
Hmm.
learn something from a woman, and then vice versa as well, because she's not going to want to give up any of her power either, by having learned something from the other person. So I mean, until you have a very deep, abiding, safe, secure relationship with that person, which is a very rare thing, not really possible in COVID, I don't think, for anybody in lockdowns. But yeah, I'd say 99% of all relationships, I don't think you could do it in that. The person would have to be ready to not just inhabit your position, but inhabit your ontology.
Hmm.
And that's the pedagogy that we have, and it's not like a master and a learner kind of thing, not like apprenticeship, but the person who's learning is inhabiting the ontology of the person that's keeping the knowledge.
Hmm.
And
Have you?
so they're sharing it in that relation where there's a fluid self other boundary, where there's no longer me and you, but it's just us two. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And we're kind of one thing.
I recently bumped into a very interesting phrase called somebody coined ontological flooding. And the idea is that if you break these dams around your ontology,
Yeah,
when you look, when you engage with other people's ontologies, that's when ontological flooding happens. So you become more open and
hmm.
I
In a
mean,
good way, like with a
in a
roast
good way,
patty.
in a good way,
Yeah,
in a good way.
not like as in Holland, and the walls are coming down and everyone's going to start swimming.
No, that's my concern with the term because it's not actually usually associated with something good if something is flooding,
Yeah,
but it breaks the dams and it allows you to really engage in the other person's ontology
yeah,
and really experience it, and then maybe still go back into your own little ontology if you want to, but the experience is a different thing than looking into it as it has dams around it.
mm.
Um, so that's an interesting state of mind that's required to do this. I
Yeah.
think
What's
I think
all water again?
it's all water again. Yeah, I didn't even notice that one. You're right. And but you said, okay, if you do that with close people, there might be rivalry there. Um, why not with same sex? Why do you think there's no rivalry there?
Well, yeah, it's funny with so I know with men, when you make that friendship,
Mhm.
if even if there's a rivalrous dynamic, if the other person knows something, then it's it's in your best interest if they want to share that with you.
Mhm.
Even if you have a rivalry with them, it's in your
Mhm.
best interest to learn that thing and try and get better at it than they are. So self-interest again. And I know it's the same with women. I know they have quite rivalrous dynamics there too.
Mhm. I this is a totally different track, but let's explore it anyway. What I've noticed in my just from my personal experiences in various situations, there's a
Yeah,
there's a competition or rivalry going on in a playful way between men, and as the pressure rises they become more
yeah.
cooperative.
Mm.
But with women, for me at least, it seems to be the other way around. So they're
Oh,
when there's no pressure, they're more cooperative, but as the pressure rises they become less cooperative.
yeah. Unless they're bored when there's no pressure. But that goes for all of us. Yeah, I guess the reason why I'm saying it's opposite sex couples is it's like I'm not saying this is a an indigenous thing or a biological thing at all. It's I think it's just a response to the patriarchy
Mm,
completely. There's such an asymmetrical power
mm,
dynamic
makes sense.
there between males and females in relation to each other and
Hmm.
in the institutions that they're forced to occupy together, of domesticity, marriage, de facto relations,
Mm,
motherhood, fatherhood, parenting, all of these institutions that they inhabit that have been
hmm,
structured a certain way. It puts them in an asymmetrical relation.
hmm.
And there's various resistances and resentments around that, particularly over the last decade, have made it increasingly difficult for men and women to learn anything from each other.
But
I've found in any kind of relationship,
but
you
but
know.
but actually,
But I
if
think you watch gay guys together, you watch lesbians together, you watch any kind of queer folk together. They have a very different dynamic together, even when they're like proper catty or like rivalrous as well. It's a different feel to it.
Mhm.
In the end, there's a kind of a solidarity there. But that solidarity, that's not just a natural thing either. That just comes with preferring meat and veg to a but it's gone kind of thing. It's more about it's a response to settler patriarchy and all that sort of stuff as well.
Mhm, mhm. But that could mean that if everybody agrees to be taught by the land, then
Yeah.
you could direct the rivalry or the competition towards seeing more of what the land has to give,
Mm.
and
Yeah, that's it.
um, and and that could then have a positive effect of the competition.
Mm. Mm.
Um, so it could actually be a very interesting group exercise, and I mean that's what happens also when there's a nomadic group that has to for some reason enter a new yet unknown bioregion, right? I guess. um how does that work? I mean, they come in there and then what? Then they have to follow the water. They have to somehow start making sense of what's going on, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, there's places aren't empty. There are always people and entities
Mhm,
in places.
mhm,
And I mean, if you're coming into a region and there are no people there, that's probably because those people have been killed to make room for you to come in. That probably means the vanguard of whatever your group has come through and genocided all those people. So you'll probably be finding their bones everywhere, at
mhm,
least. And you're going to have to settle that first.
mhm,
But whenever you come into a new country, a new place, a new bioregion, you have to call out. So you have to call out for the old people there. You call out for the entities, spirits in the landscape. You call out from them in quite like oh kind of tone. Oh, calling out for those old people like that, and you say your name and why you're there. What
mhm,
what are you doing there?
mhm,
And then you'd have to do the water thing because you have to find the water.
mhm.
The
Just
it
for
can be
pure
fresh
survival.
water. It can
Mhm,
be fresh. No, it can be fresh water or it can be salt water. But that's the next part of the protocol of introducing yourself to the place. Is that you need to get your smell into the water so that the place recognizes your smell
mhm,
because you smell strange to that place
mhm,
because you are not made up of that place yet. All the
mhm,
parasites you have,
mhm,
which is most of you, is from somewhere else, and that's
mhm,
putting off a smell the place doesn't like.
mhm,
So you gotta put your smell there. So you get your armpit smell. So you wipe under your arms, rub it in your hands like that, and then get some dirt or sand or rock like that, and you put that out into the water. And then often it's really good to get right down in the water and really wash your face You know how Vikings used to pass that bowl of water around as a kind of a bonding ritual, and they'd all take a sip out of it, but then splash it on their face and blow their nose in it and pass it to the next fella. It's kind of
So,
like
so you're
that, but about
mixing all your germs. Yeah. Uh-huh.
a million times less disgusting, and heaps more COVID safe
Yeah.
to be doing it into the living water in a
Yeah.
body of water.
Yeah.
But you're really washing your face, and you're letting, parts of yourself come out from your mouth,
Hmm.
nose, eyes, hair, into that. And then, the place knows you then. So it knows your smell, and then it connects with you, and then it starts the business of sharing with you, so that it starts to replace all of your atoms that you brought there, starts to replace it with atoms,
Hmm.
particles, parasites, etc., from that place.
Hmm.
And after a couple of months of that, you start to smell like that place. But
Hmm.
if you come into the place the right way, and you've called out the right way,
Hmm.
and that you keep, an awareness on, the fact that there are entities, sentient entities in that landscape, and that you're walking with respect there, and calling out every time you come into a new place, and the place gets to know you, then it'll start sending things for you. At first, it'll be like, there's nothing here. This is wasteland. This is
Hmm.
wilderness. Nothing.
Hmm.
And then, when you start to come into the rhythms of that place, if the place likes you, then all of a sudden it'll be like, there'll be kangaroos everywhere. Like, you wake up and
Hmm.
just walk just out of camp, and there'll be 20 kangaroos there. There'll be, suddenly you'll see eagles all the time. You'll see 1,000 things, and country will start providing things for you. It'll provide you with meat. It'll put animals to share with you in your path. It'll direct you to, where you can dig, for yams. It'll direct you to, where and when with the honeybees, if you're watching for them. Pretty much everything. Yeah, fish, bird, fruit, nut, everything. The place will provide that for you.
Hmm.
But if you're just coming in and your intent is extractive and you're not respecting the place, then it'll just close all the doors. It'll close the shop and turn off the taps, and there'll be nothing there for you.
Have you ever experienced a weird Western, however that acronym works,
Western educated, industrialized, rich, democratic.
exactly, person uh, um, successfully merge him or herself with nature in the way you just described?
Oh shit, yeah. It's and that's controversial, and it's not just controversial, and that's, when we were talking earlier about that woman I did an interview with, where I just kept cutting her off.
Hmm.
It was because of that
Hmm.
that issue, the issue of my prejudice and my difficulty at allowing her to tell her story of how she came to that.
Hmm. Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It was purely my, and not just mine, but my community's just sort of, nah, nah, nah. Settlers have got nothing. They have nothing. They can't know. They can never know. They're blind. They're deaf. They're stupid. They're not capable. Um,
And not right
but
now,
every
but the,
single
the whole
every
point is to
single one of
learn.
us, and we all say that, and it's in there. But
Hmm.
every single one of us, I don't care who you are, every single one of us knows it's not true as well.
Hmm.
Because I don't know one Aboriginal person, I don't know one Indigenous person in the world that doesn't have like really close Anglo friends,
Hmm.
like really close friends that they deeply respect and that they know are fully capable and open and sensitive and have the same spirit that they do.
Hmm.
I don't know. There's an attachment that you get to this idea that you're special and that you have a special connection to country, just on the virtue of, I don't know, like your demographics or something like that. But it's
Hmm.
not. It's the knowledge that you have, throughout your life, and how you come to that. And look, they have it. I'd love to tell you about this fella, if we have time. Michel Gruber, in the Netherlands. He's a perfect example.
Okay.
He's somebody he inherited a bit of law, a bit of folklore from his, grandfather. So he's Frisian and Saxon descent, this fellow, and the Frisians are kind of the indigenous people there in the Netherlands. And he inherited quite a bit of law from his great grandfather, and he's basically just applied that throughout his life on the land, to the point that he's like a consummate man of the land.
Interesting.
He knows every day. He can read country, just perfectly. And when I talk to him, I'm just talking to another indigenous person, And
what's his name again?
Michel Gruber. Nobody knows him. He's an unknown, but he should be famous. He should be.
Could you connect us?
Everybody should be talking to him. Yeah, I will.
Thank you.
I will indeed, because he's absolutely incredible. You have to talk to him. I won't do too many spoilers, but he has been. I've had him on my podcast 3 times.
I haven't heard it.
I've never had anybody on 3 times, and I'll certainly have him on again. He's like amazing knowledge. We did one episode, where it was just and we had to stop recording, and then we kept going. It was for hours, and we were just talking about tracking.
Okay.
And I was like, I came into it. He said, Josh, I want to talk to you about the tracking. And I'm like, oh, well, this will be a short conversation. In fucking Holland, what are you going to track there? Yeah, all right, bruz, what do you think you know about tracking? Let's go.
Okay.
5 minutes, go. And he's just, and we're about 3 minutes in when I realized, oh shit, I'm out of my depth.
Oh, wow.
He's not just like some, Dutchman following the spoor. I'm following the tracks of the animal in the ground. The entire system. The entire system. And he knows it intimately and constantly shifting, and he's there in the flux and telling me how he works that. And I'm like, okay, this is like, I got to call you uncle now. It's like, this is like sitting down with one of my old people talking, and he had the best yarn. And he was telling me about traditional fire management of country in the Netherlands too. Now, you might have heard about that in Australia.
Yeah, well, elsewhere,
we're famous for it here. The idea that we burn the country, burn the land off in certain ways in certain seasons, and that's what regenerates everything. We're quite famous. They call it fire stick farming, but not many people know that pretty much everywhere has done this.
In Africa,
so even yeah, exactly, definitely in Africa, definitely in the United States, all over the place, but Europe too. Probably even in England. But definitely in Holland. So he was telling me about burning the heather. But he was telling me that the salamander, have you ever heard the folklore about the salamander?
No.
Like a magical lizard that doesn't get burned by fire?
No.
Like, I think there was one in Harry Potter. And
fire salamander somewhere.
That idea. There's that folklore, European folklore, and it's a myth. The idea that salamanders are fireproof. And I asked him about that and if that had any relation. He went, oh, yeah, that's a seasonal indicator. So that's a seasonal indicator. See, the salamanders hibernate like most reptiles do in cold places under the ground. And at a very particular time when you see these flowers on this tree and the heather is doing this and those insects are doing that, and there's a whole heap of different signs that happen at exactly the right time, that's the time when you have to burn that undergrowth there in that place. And so, humans are part of that. They have an ecological niche there to such an extent and for so long that there's been an adaptive relation, and a symbiosis with the salamanders. So you burn off that country there, and that wakes the salamanders up and lets them know it's time to come up from hibernation. And he's saying that the salamanders are dying out now because nobody's waking them up. So they're not all waking up in time, and a lot of them are just dying under the ground. And so I guess the salamander folklore is just about that, from that image of the salamanders walking across the ashes after they've come up out of the ground after the fire, you know. I found that beautiful. So I
Yeah.
mean, that's another thing that I would recommend to people is look to your stories. You know, you still have stories, and there's more to those stories. There's more to it. There's
And
heaps more to it than you can imagine.
yeah, because it takes a long time to learn all of this, right? I mean, he, just building on him as an example, he
Yeah,
inherited the folklore from his grandfather.
yeah,
Then he applied it and he immersed himself
yeah.
into nature. And so over decades, probably, he really got in tune with that.
It was fragmentary, though, the knowledge he got from his great grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
It was very fragmentary. It was enough that he could discern a pattern and a process, like a methodology for being in the landscape. And for him, it's a constant and ongoing process of inquiry that he just loves. Like every time he says it starts when he's, you know, sitting, you know, in his hallway, putting his boots on and deciding what he's going to wear. When he goes outside, what the conditions are going to be like. He says the process of inquiry begins there, and then it's just constant after that. So it's what the wind is doing and what the scent, what scent is coming to him on the wind, but also he's intensely aware of where his scent is going and the effect that that's having on the landscape around him. And so he's like, you know, in communion with a fox there, and he's watching what's going on with the fox. And the fox that's picking up his scent, the deer, the everything else, you know.
So I mean, imagining people living in a group like that, probably everybody is somewhat in tune with what's going on, but
Yeah.
not to that extent. That would be my guess. And is there something like a leadership role, also historically, of that kind, of somebody who really knows that stuff deeply, who's really connected?
So this is funny. How does an emergent land-based governance system occur? Okay, we're both friends with Jim Rutt, and Jim Rutt, like I've stolen this. I don't even credit him with this, but I say it all the time. Is that symbioses always start in a parasitic relation.
Yeah.
So I guess initially you're in a parasitic relation with that place.
Yeah.
And symbioses evolve. And I guess, you know, if they're, you know, it's not just the person that's studied shamanism or the one who's got the most crystals or the one that's kind of like, oh, I'm the shaman and everybody has to feed me because that's the way it goes. And I do sound healing with a frickin' didgeridoo, and I got smudge sticks and I've got a pipe from the bloody Lakota, or you know what I mean? It's not that person that's coming with all that. I imagine, see, it's inherited knowledge in our way. So I imagine if you're starting out in a place and the place accepts you as a group of people, and it knows the other people who were there before are not coming back to that particular place, and you're accepted there by the place, and it starts to embrace you, then I imagine it will identify the people that it's going to communicate with in different ways. You know, and that'll be everybody, you know. So this guy, it might have that lens for tracking. And seeing that system in that way. This other person might have that feel for water. And there might be a group of people who have that feel for water, and then there might be another group of people who have a feel for, well, when I watch the salamanders crawling across the ash in that particular way they do, having come up from hibernation, there is that rhythm, and they're moving like this, and then they might start dancing. You know what I mean? And they might feel that dance coming through. Somebody else, they might feel song. And I think these things will be emergent. And I guess eventually then you have interspecies communications going on with a lot of different things, you know, including plants. So you'll have somebody who ends up having quite a relationship with plants and plant medicines. And chances are that person will end up half naked in a hut on the outskirts of the village, bloody grinding up herbs, going. I'm just being silly. That's a stereotype, but you know what I mean.
Yes, yes,
You
yes.
know, you go in and there'll be bird beaks hanging in bundles from the rafters.
We talked about this in our pirate call, how the fragmentation of knowledge about the land creates a governance system.
Yeah,
That's what's coming up right now.
yeah, that's it.
Um,
And that's how your clan groups will form, is the
mhm,
various different
yeah,
totemic relations that'll form over time.
mhm,
You know, there'll be a particular family that has a particular affinity for this season, and
mhm,
therefore those keystone species there in that season. And there
mhm,
won't be just one keystone species for your community. I mean, maybe there'll be a main one, but that shifts. A lot of people don't realize that with that keystone species theory. They think,
mhm,
well, you know, these are the people of the reeds. Boom, that's it, finished. But no, it shifts. These go in cycles, so it's different in each season. Which species are the keystone species, and it's seldom just one thing on its own. So if
mhm.
it's reeds, it'll be reeds and ibis and this particular shellfish. You know what I mean?
Okay.
It's things that come together in these sort of totemic
That solves
relation.
my question, because a system um, always needs to be viewed as a whole to make sense. But
Yeah,
if you see it as a time series, then you can be an expert in the system at a certain time during the cycle.
yeah, yeah. That's it. And you will hold the story
Mhm,
for that place. So there'll be a certain center of increase in that bioregion, you know, for that set of totemic relations, and then it'll usually be attached to a season. And you'll find that there's nowhere in the world that has 4 seasons. You know, 4 seasons that's an economic cycle
yeah,
about what can be extracted. You'll find there's usually more like between 6 and 8 seasons in any place on the planet if you watch carefully for it.
mhm,
You know, and there will be increased centers in that bioregion for different keystone species at different times.
mhm,
And those will be the places that you have to pay attention to.
mhm,
And those will be places that will choose people
mhm,
who will come into a special relation with that place. And they'll be the people that learn the right words to call out for the old people there, for the entities there in that place. They'll come to know them through dream, through being there, understanding, you know, and that interspecies
mhm,
communication is going on and the way they read that place and come to know that place over decades. And then you'll start to see story. They'll find story there. You know, the
mhm,
plants, the birds, the fish, everything there in the end, that aggregate of all that communication will give them a story. And they'll
mhm.
find story for that place. And, you know, by the time that starts happening, you'll notice that your community's probably starting to develop its own accent.
Because they develop a certain language
Yeah,
for.
and it won't
Okay.
be about. I mean, yeah, there'll be some aspect of that'll be will be about the mix of languages, you know, and accents of the people who have come into that place, and you
Mhm,
pick up things from each other. But there will also be something unique there
mhm,
that doesn't come out of the same ethnic mix in another place,
mhm,
you know. So you'll find that that place will start to shape your tongue, and so at first it will be an accent, and then, you know, it'll be. I mean, I don't know. You go to England 500 years ago, you wouldn't know what the fuck they were saying. You
Yes.
know,
Yeah, it
you wouldn't be
evolves.
able to
Yeah.
understand them.
Yeah.
Even now, you know, you read Shakespeare, and it's like Jesus. Um, you know, I can't understand that.
Yeah.
Same way, you know, it's only like 100, 200 years that you know, your language starts to change completely.
Mhm,
And by, I mean, pretty much. Look, it takes 500 to 800 years on the life cycle that we have in terms of reproduction as human beings. It's like 500 to 800 years for people to become, um, people to adapt in terms of, to evolve, to be of a place.
Okay.
It takes that long for mutations to happen. Spiritually and in every other way, it's about 500 to 800 years to really come into that place, to the point where you have a unique language that
Okay.
is of that place. It's of that place.
How,
It may
how,
have some.
where does that number come from? That's super interesting. How do you derive that number?
Um. That was like that was yeah. I was looking at Galapagos studies. I think
Hmm.
initially with the that famous one from, it was about a decade ago, with the bird beak length.
Hmm.
And they were looking at the amount of time, the amount of generations that it took, and they've got a tight turnaround, with how fast they breed,
Hmm.
how long it took for the beaks to lengthen when a certain beetle became extinct there and was no longer available.
Hmm.
So how many generations it took for that longer beak to become a population-wide
Got it. So
adaptation
so you
there.
you you measure you measure the evolutionary cycles for species adaptation to
Yeah, so
the land.
instead of a 1 year cycle, I went, okay, 15-year cycle.
Yeah.
And I went, all right, that's 500 to 800 years. But also looking historically.
Hmm.
So I was looking at Maori in New Zealand and different Polynesian, groups, and how long it took. So Maori have been there, over 500 years, just over 500 years. And that's long enough where their language is quite
Okay.
unique to that place, and expresses the spirit of that place. And they at first, they come in and they made a terrible mess there. You know, it's
Mhm.
there were quite a few species that went away. There were people there that went away also.
Mhm.
First people who were there, initially.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, but the Maori, they did come into the place, after that initial disruption, and they come into that parasitic relation and then that symbiotic relation, which is easy enough because they're already coming from a place where they had that. So it was just a matter of, of course, it would take a bit of time, but, of course, you would return to that, but in a different way in this new place, and
Okay.
yeah, I mean, I just think that's doable. If it's doable on a bloody island, it's got to be doable on bloody 1,000 acres in Utah or something,
Yeah.
surely. Yeah.
So, um, following following the water, to get in tune with nature itself, but also trying to hear from, trying to find stories that people have been
Mm.
telling each
Mm.
other, that's the starting point. And
Yeah,
then
I think it's more listening for the stories.
okay.
I mean, I think if you try too hard to find them, then you're going to get people who are going to make them up.
Ah,
And if they're
okay.
make up stories that,
Well, then it misleads
and
you.
that will be patterned on the wrong stories that they're bringing from,
Mm, mm.
from before. And yeah, that'll
So
slow things up.
how do you, what's the difference between finding and listening to the, or hearing for the stories? How would you go about it? If you're in Utah, because you gave that example. Um,
I would just not be in a hurry.
mhm.
I would not be in a hurry for any, design to be designed. And that's the hard part, because you're going to want to have a functioning group. So I guess you would have to have a commitment right from the start to a shared understanding that you're in a transitional culture, and that you're going to be in a culture of transition for, you know, maybe a century in that
Mhm.
place, and to be able to commit to that, and allow that to grow in that way. And that slowly, and that probably over the next couple of decades, um, songs, dances, stories will begin to emerge,
Uh,
and you'll have your first stories that'll start to come out of the landscape,
so
and a
so
lot of them will be about things that happened there, like actual things that happened and that people experienced.
mhm.
And the stories that you tell, your oral history of your community, but also there'll be things that'll happen. There'll be people will be injured in that landscape. You know,
Yeah, and
there'll be poisonings, there'll be woundings, there will be, rock falls and bloody sinkholes, and
that that
God knows there'll be
that
earth tremors.
uh, 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 that resonates a lot. I recently had a intuition about uh, the future
Yeah.
that was so strong that I had to put it into a tweet immediately because it was tweet sized. And that was that the future will be slow,
Hmm.
because we're all experiencing this massive increase in speed, but that is simply not sustainable. That'll break
Yeah.
down into something else. And I believe that this sense of patience and deep experience and slowness
Mm.
is a requirement actually for
Mm.
building something meaningful and good. So
Yeah.
that's very nice, very nice. Thank you.
That's it. And you'll be wanting to have something that's going to last more than 300 to 500 years, you know?
Mm.
You'll be looking, and I don't know what your motivation is for that, except for that it's the right way to be. Like the right way to be now and to be satisfied, deeply satisfied, and to have a deeply satisfying, beautiful life and a community is to live in such a way that it will last for many thousands of years,
Why do you think that
But
is? And is that something
I
that's
think
general?
it's just. I mean, you could just explain it as evolutionary. I'd say it was a patterning of spirit. That's what creation is and what creation does, and that's our role. And that's how we are here. We have an ecological niche that makes us the custodial species, and your spirit won't leave you be until you're occupying that role, and you're in right relation. You can't truly exist properly without being in relation. That's what I'd say from my point of view. But then I'd also, if I was inhabiting a different ontology, I would just say it's an evolutionary imperative, that it's
Mm.
an evolutionary patterning of
Mhm,
human
mhm.
beings to live in the same patterns as you've lived for 99% of your species history. Now
And
that
also
doesn't
to
mean, and
preserve.
that doesn't mean the things. I'm not talking about your physical culture. I'm not saying
Mhm,
that you have to be running around in animal skins,
mhm,
and grunting at each other. Like, not that that's what the past was like at all anyway, but
mhm,
often people panic when they think about that, and they think that you're going to be descending into some kind of brutish savagery or something like
mhm.
that. And you might still have, so you'll still have, I mean, how long will this Brolga last that I found at a garage sale here? This little bronze Brolga. I mean, that's my
Well,
pulwai, my totem.
for a long,
It's a
long time.
crane, I think you call it there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so will that not be there? Will that not be there when this lovely slow world emerges? It'll be there.
Mm,
I might still have a desk and it'll be sitting on it.
mm,
You know,
mhm.
yeah, it doesn't mean your things will have to change and all the affordances of all these things will disappear. Because basically all the affordances you seek from all this technology, that's it's already existing. These are things that you can find that land will give you.
So,
Land gives you what you need.
I mean, you've just partially answered my question now, but let's make it a bit more explicit. When a weird person is confronted with this idea,
Mm.
and goes into panic mode, um, how do you personally um, guide them out of that panic mode into some deeper understanding?
Yeah, I think it's just to remind people of just the amazing pluralism of lifestyles that have been all around the planet.
Mm,
People imagine indigenous is just, we have this lie of that it's all this hunter gatherer, and that's all it is. You
yeah.
know what I mean? But I mean, and everybody makes the assumption that things went wrong when agriculture was invented. But most of the subsistence, farming and pastoralism and everything else that's been going on for thousands of years is like beautifully sustainable and always has been. You know, it's yeah. I mean, even your the terrace farmings,
Mhm.
the terraces that you see, you know, built into mountainsides and hillsides. These things are all, you know, very sustainable in how those people were living, and there was quite a bit of ease involved with it. So, you know, it's a lot of that panic is about this idea that you're suddenly going to have to be in fight or flight response and hypervigilance all the time, and that, you know, it'll be the Walking Dead where like even worse than the zombies is the other people because they'll be trying to kill you all the time, and then all the animals will be trying to kill you, and the plants will try and kill you, and the insects will be biting you, and it'll be shitty, and you know. But you know, who said it has to be like that?
Mhm. Mhm.
Land is very gentle with you when you're embedded in it and you're occupying your proper niche and you're in proper relation with everything there. Land is quite gentle with you,
Mhm.
and you always know when the different insect species are going to, you know, arrive or proliferate and do their things, and you know where you need to move to or be, or what kind of fires you have to put, what kind of smoke, you know, to deal with all these things. You know, you learn those things over time, and that sort of deep symbiotic interspecies communication that you have going on.
Mm.
And like I said at the start, it all comes back to the water. That's where it begins, and it you know, everything goes back round in that cycle too with the water.
Mm.
You
Yep.
know, it's there's panic, and then, you know, and fair enough. But you know, I think you know, most feedlot pigs will panic for a day or two when you open the gate,
Mhm.
but it's not long before they running around like digging, snuffling around in the dirt and rolling in the mud, and you know, growing big tusks and sharpening them on trees and having a great time.
So,
You know,
so you're saying it is like with everything else, patience is a good response to the panic of the weird people.
yeah, and you know, mutual aid too. There's, I mean, it's not a hero's journey. Like, there's a hell of a lot of YouTube videos of people out there who are, you know, they have their cabin. You know,
Hmm.
man versus wild. I made my
Hmm.
log cabin, and here's where I make my jerky, and here's where I smoke my venison, and these are my bow and arrows, and you know, this is
Hmm.
where I grow my herbs, you know, and these are my things. You
Hmm.
know, that's a hard life, man.
Hmm.
You know, and they do have a hard time, and of course everyone's going to be terrified of that. But I guess it comes back to that scale thing and the economies of scale. If there's two of you, then you've got that gain, that power
Hmm.
law there, where you have that greater efficiency. I mean, you also have more problems that come with that as well. Because, you know, you've got your
Yeah,
woman there with you, and you're going to be fighting from time to time too.
yeah, but you're also gonna have good times, right?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So you know, it's good. And then there's three. But if you've you know, if you're doing this with 300 people, it's amazing in that kind of like, oh my God, you know, just the amazing things that can happen with that many people all cooperating, and if there's not too much rivalry,
Mm.
and there's a kind of a mutual aid framework happening, and a sort of an open and sharing economy, and there's plenty of velocity for every unit of value, you know, information, all these sorts of things, as long
Mm.
as somebody's not trying to accumulate all of the herb lore of that place so that they can be the frickin' shaman and bloody,
Mm.
I don't
Mm.
know, try and be a cult leader or something, then you'd be right. And there's the problem. There's the problem with weird folk. And it hasn't been long that they've been like that. It's just, I mean, I think you can pretty much track it back to, you know, Martin Luther banging a note on the door. They weren't like that before.
Mm.
You know, I mean, there's been oligarchs trying to like make permanent hierarchies happen there, but you know, they weren't very fucking successful, not for a really long time. But so, you know, it's yeah, it's what the Catholic Church did to families, as you can, you know, as you can see in the in the records, what the Catholic Church did to families to break people up into individuals,
Mhm.
so that no families could own wealth together, but only individuals could, so that they could make more money, I guess. And then it's what the Protestants did after that, with the literacy, to try and have that go one step further and have that individual communication with the divine.
Mm.
You individually, you will read your Bible and you will make your own individual interpretation of it. So
Mhm.
suddenly everybody had their own bespoke algorithm of God. You know what I mean? So it basically did the same thing that YouTube's done to the Zoomers here. You know, actually, Zoomers don't watch YouTube, do they? That's just Gen X. No. So what what it did to us? Yeah.
But I mean, I would not want to go back to the
Oh, hang on. Sorry. Let me finish it. I was
yeah yeah
basically just saying
yeah
it hasn't been long.
yeah
So the weird people are a minority on the earth, and they
yeah
haven't been like that for very long. It was just a few hundred years ago,
yeah.
and they were
So,
all right before that. They were okay. They'd been pissing around and experimenting with civilizations, but we all do that when we're young. Everybody has an experiment with civilization when they're a bit younger, so it's fine. You know, Geez, I mean, they only just got there. The place was covered with ice, bloody 10,000 years ago or something, and
mm.
then so give them a minute. Before you cancel all of Europe, just give them a minute. They got to get their shit together.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
the problem is they fucked up the rest of the living conditions in the process. But
yeah.
that's what we're dealing with.
Teenagers will do that if daddy's not home.
Yeah, that's true. So where was Daddy?
Yeah. And if mummy doesn't smack, and if there aren't quite a few aunties with big sticks around
Huh.
the joint,
They were all missing. They were all missing.
takes a
Mm.
fucking village. It really does.
Mm.
Anyway, so Europe's a teenager that grew up without a village.
Yeah,
You know, yeah,
that's a nice image. I'm going to use that.
yeah,
Um, but I'm curious about one thing, and that's also your personal account. Um, you must be able to switch on and off ontologies in yourself when you migrate between city and university and all of that stuff, and then
yeah.
you go somewhere else. Um,
Well, what do I do when I move between high ground and low ground?
and how does it
What do
feel?
I? So
Uh,
what do I? Okay, if I'm walking on country,
mm,
so I might be following along in some country where it's where the dominant species is coolabah trees,
mhm,
and as I'm going along, that starts to give way to mulga trees,
mhm,
and I'm shifting into that.
mhm.
Um, I didn't have to change. Like I'm inhabiting it's a different
Ah,
landscape, so I have to
it's a
move differently. I
mhm.
have to call out for different entities of place because the spirit of that place has changed. Is it wet? Is it dry? Is it high ground? Is it low ground? Is it red soil? Is it black soil? Is it, you know what I mean? And when you're walking on country is always changing and you're moving differently
But
as you're moving between those places.
okay,
So why would it be any different moving into a city?
so
You
so
just have
so
to walk
there's
differently and
there's a there's
half
a
kill yourself.
there's a gradual process from moving from high to low ground, or however you want to call that. Okay, but now you've arrived in one of these places,
Yeah.
and then it hits you, and you say, "Wow, this morning I was in the other place, and I
Mm.
was somehow a different Tyson, right?" Or doesn't that feel like that?
Well, it's constantly moving. I mentioned earlier that pedagogy, when you learn something from somebody in our way, that you completely inhabit their ontology,
Mm-hmm.
and there is a fluid self other boundary between you and that person.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same with place.
Mm-hmm.
You have a fluid self other boundary with
Mm-hmm.
that place. You're in relation to that place. Like you are a pair.
Mm-hmm.
for the time that you're there and you have a relationship together, and your ontology is in that relation. It's not in you, it's in that relation. And basically, as you move through different relations, the same as in your kinship, as you move between different relations, you're talking to your sister here, you're inhabiting that relation. But then uncle says something, so you switch across to there and you're talking to uncle, you're inhabiting a completely different relation. There, you know what I mean? And that's how that goes. It's but that's what you are. You are your network of relations. You're not this self-contained unit.
But there's an emphasis
where everything special and fabulous about you is inside of you. Everything that's good about you, and even all of your mind and knowledge, is contained in your network of relations. So if you're inhabiting that network of relations, then you're just moving through it.
Okay. So what I was maybe searching for here in that question is, what do you feel emphasized by high versus low ground? When you find yourself in high ground, what do you feel emphasized in yourself? And when you are in low ground, what do you feel emphasized through that web of ontologies around you?
Well, you're reading the landscape so that like you're looking, okay, that rocky ridge there, and you're looking at the entire ridge, and you're going, well, I can see that's a series of progressions along that ridge. So that'll be ceremony place for the old fellas. So, so that'll be up on this ridge here. I can't go up there. You know what I mean? You'll be thinking, I can't go up there. And why would you want to anyway? But then you're looking for the common ground places all along the bottom of the ridge. And so it's in that liminal space where that edge, where high ground gives way to low ground, you'll find the most lush undergrowth there. You'll find the most seed, the most fruit, the most animals. And you'll also find the most water there too. So you will follow that. And then you'll move and you'll go from red soil to black soil. And you'll go, well, there must be women's business places around here too, because they'll camp off that way and do that. So you look out for feeling for that too. And you'll avoid those places as a man, as a male, and then off you go. It's basically that. It's constantly fluid. It's flux. You're not really, you're constantly looking for same and different as you go around. So like a change in wind direction, that's in that moment, and then everything's shifted.
So there's a recurring pattern in all of this, and that ties back to the core of the weird people, which is all about the emphasis on the individual, whereas the way you describe immersing yourself into relationship with the land and with other people, you're not an individual ever, and
you're not, and you're never ever alone.
Exactly, but and even if that is so if I'm inhabiting the weird person ontology, I can intellectually understand this, but I differentiate between the mindset shift and the soul set shift, right? So I can have a mindset shift that I intellectually grasp this, but I cannot feel it. My soul set shift hasn't happened.
Well, what do you think of as your will? I guess you would be where we'll come to after you work through that.
The will.
Yeah. So
That's
your will would
very good
be as
question.
an individual acting upon the landscape in order to build, make, design the things that you need, to do for your family, for your community. Your individual will is what's driving you. You decide where you're going to walk and what your purpose is going to be. And that's what it is to be free. Is that close to describing how your will is working as you're moving through a landscape?
So that's very, very interesting, because it depends on how much in tune you are between what I said in the beginning, system 1, system 2, right?
Yeah. That's it.
So if your system is if system one that drives you in a certain direction, your system two keeps on explaining to yourself why you do that, you're not in tune with anything. And being permeating the shield around your system one to let people in, to let nature in, to let other ontologies in, and then tightening the loop between your system two and the system one. I think that's where will comes up slowly over time. If you really tighten that loop over years, I would say. And that is the process that I'm most unsure about in all of this for somebody coming into the as socialized as a weird person going into the country, and being able to really let go of that part, or how Jeremy Lent would call it the animate consciousness, right? And allowing that to come up and become a partner inside of your mind, an equal partner, that helps you navigate the world. And doing this, taking this step, I think is the absolute hardest for most people that are confronting this. And other than giving them DMT or letting them breathe or letting them sit in nature for a long time, I have no idea how to trigger that. Right.
It is difficult. I think that's what stories do. Story. That's why I said your stories have to emerge. So story itself is a psychotechnology that allows you to inhabit the ontology of another entity, even of a system. Another system even. So you're able to inhabit that through story. It's a massive shortcut. And I think with most people, they just have to hear the right story.
Often enough so they can believe it. Or it's just the right story. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, no, it has to be the right story at the right time when they're ready to hear it.
Makes sense. Okay. A lot of stuff. Nice.
Yeah, Dunbar. I want to tell you how we've been using, in my house, we've been using Dunbar as a verb.
Okay.
So we've invented a practice that we call Dunbarring, right? So, the Dunbar number is that 150, maybe 300, whatever people. That's, but the amount of people before you get too much trouble with scale, where there's not enough transparency and the commons are fucked, right? So anyway, that's the Dunbar number, and everyone talks about, even people are even talking about Dunbars. They're calling communities of the right amounts of people Dunbars and all that sort of thing. We've been using it as a verb, and the verb is about culling, pruning your networks down. We're Dunbarring. We're trying to prune excess relations.
That's nice. I like it.
Yeah. And so for me, it's about, okay, well,
social hygiene.
Can I link people up with other people and sort of set that in motion there, and then let that go, and boom, and off that little island goes that way.
Beautiful. Have you told?
I don't know, but my woman, she uses she'll every now and then, she'll get angry at somebody. Someone will say something horrendous to her, in a meeting or online, and she'll mutter like, "Oh, I'm gonna Dunbar the shit out of that guy." He just finished.
That's good. Have you shared with him?
With him?
Yeah.
No, not yet. I was gonna ask Jim for an intro, but I don't know. I'll get to that.
if I'll probably have a similar conversation with him, and
Ah, yeah, that'll be cool. We'll
I'll
hook,
let
hook
him
us
know.
up.
I'll hook
Yeah,
you up.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
By
Oh,
the
that's
way,
great. I like for people to do that rather than me ask, like, can you introduce me to Robin, please?
well, when I have if I ever have that conversation, I will definitely hook you guys up.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, speaking of which, I've heard you say in several conversations that your you like to call her your woman, your wife, your
yeah, yeah,
partner. Um, she's busy thinking about distributed systems and indigenous systems. Is
yeah,
that right?
yeah.
Um, do you think she would be up for a conversation like this around this specific topic as well?
Yeah, I think so. Although she said, stop telling people what I
Well,
know
she
things.
could dunbar me right away afterwards. No problem.
No, she's just got more appropriate levels of shame than I do. She doesn't like to chuck herself out there and like I'm just like, well, at what stage of your PhD do you feel like you're going to be enough of an expert to be as good as all these other losers out there who don't really know anything either and bloody talking up like they know something? At what stage do you think you're going to know as much as you
Mm,
think that I know? Which,
mm.
like, I don't know much. I'm just out here talking shit. It's And she said, well, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, but
Um,
that's
but
usually
by
if
the same token,
uh,
yeah, look, I think if you do you want me to intro you to I know she's doing a lot of thinking around this, and so she's working on a lot of applications and stuff, and she does have her ethics sorted out, and she's about to start data collection soon.
mhm.
Um, you know,
I'd totally love that. Yes.
mm,
So for several reasons, for this series of conversations, but also I'm doing a project we call Motherland, and within that context, we're trying to find a way of using distributed ledgers to institutionalize the GADA system. You know, the GADA system is
no,
it's a beautiful governance system from Ethiopia and northeast of Africa. So it spans all the way to Kenya.
okay. Well, look,
And
she will be very, very, very interested in learning about that from you.
mhm.
Anyway, so I think you'll have a good yarn.
So
That's exciting.
I'll write a little email. You can use that to
Yeah.
connect us there. Yeah.
So it's motherland called. You
Yeah,
couldn't call it fatherland. Couldn't call it fatherland there because you ruined that one before.
exactly. Yeah. Well,
That one's been ruined. You you
the
can never do it again.
motherland itself is a bit bigger than what I just said.
Yeah, yeah,
What we're trying to so the way I say it, we're successful with motherland when the people in Africa stop sending bananas and cacao and all of the rest to
yeah,
Europe and Asia and America, but start feeding themselves,
yeah.
right? And so we're trying to bring together existing technology from the continent
Hmm.
with mm, villages or communities of farmers throughout Africa. So we're preparing for first implementations in South Africa, in Ghana, Nigeria, and Ethiopia, each
Okay.
with a
Look,
different perspective.
she's going to be very interested to explore that with you.
Mhm.
Because I mean, at the moment, like I think she's starting to arrive at the conclusion that anywhere that blockchain's being entered, it's like a new wave of colonization is happening.
Mhm.
Like you can see, stuff going on in different places in Polynesia that there's bad things going on, and she's sort of just seeing a new wave of imperialism come through,
Well,
blockchain and but also digital currencies and stuff, and a lot of people getting basically Ponzi schemed in
yeah,
indigenous communities here and there.
we're,
So I think she's starting to arrive at that conclusion. It would be good for something that's in good faith.
So definitely, and I'd also love to learn from her about where she sees the pitfalls. Um,
Yeah.
Because currently we see in Ethiopia this Cardano coming in with high power, and Cardano is
Yeah.
working with the government, and where everybody I speak with, people who know the Cardano founder personally, are not very sure about this thing. So they're
Yeah.
not very
Yeah.
sure about the ethics. So I'm tend to be careful with that, and I want to do as much of the right thing as possible there.
Yeah. That's the thing. See, when you tinker these systems, when you come in, you design solutions and implement them. It's seldom going to end up anywhere good.
Yeah, that's exactly why
That's that issue of the will. That issue of
that's
will again. Will in a place. But a place like a bioregion has its own will. And part of that system, and your will has to be in sync with the place, and you're moving as much for that place as yourself at any time.
Mhm. And that is exactly
Mm.
why we don't want to go in there with any top down or whatever you want to call that thing, but all we want to do is
Yeah.
we want to use what's existing and make that stronger. That's what we would like to do.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah. Not sure if that's where the Cardano side of things goes.
I'm not sure.
And when you see digital currencies going to a place, it's just like another layer, abstracted layer coming over.
Now there
And
have
there's
to be
always,
there
just
have to be
always those externalities then.
exactly. So I don't know if I shared that with you. Probably not. But I'd like to. There's a maybe Ethan Soloviev and his idea about the 8 forms of capital. That's not his original idea, but he's very good at describing that. And so what I did an exercise around. Can you hear me, Tyson? Are you still there? Tyson, can you hear me?
Yeah, you can't hear me?
Yeah.
Yep, I can.
We've been dropping out. So
Yeah.
what I did was, as a measure of what a good life might be, putting the Maslow's dimensions in the center, and saying a good life could be defined as one that is rich on all 5 dimensions. And then ask yourself, what are the inputs for all of the dimensions directly, right? So if you want to have a good physiological needs fulfillment, then you might want to have something to eat, and might want to have a shelter, and maybe something to put to protect your skin or something like that. So then you start coding these inputs in capital forms. So in this case, it's the living capital and material capital. And then on a slightly more abstract level, there's social capital. You can do this better with friends. Or intellectual capital. If you have knowledge, you can also do this better. Experiential, if you have tried a couple of times, you can also do it better. And on a very, very abstract level, financial capital, because you can buy some of that stuff with financial capital. And now you have a matrix of the value of certain forms of capital, and now you can start comparing them to each other. And that then creates. Let me show you this one thing here. We call the EU capital ranking. So the social capital appears on different layers of abstraction, most closely, let's say, on safety and on belonging, etc. And then a little more abstract for physiological needs, as I said, where friends help you, etc. And then I can say each of these layers has a discount. So if it pays indirectly, then it's 100% of value. If it's more indirect, it's 60% and 40%. These are just made up numbers, so you can play with them. But what then emerges is evaluation of the different forms of capital against each other, right? So you have financial capital being the absolute least important part of your entire set of capital forms, and social and spiritual being super strong, right? All others more or less evened out. Funnily, material capital, the next important form for the weird people to financial capital is the second. So
yeah,
and so now building on that, you can start creating systems of value measurement and that are totally detached from all of these Ponzi scheme related financial capital systems that we have, because all of them are in their current design, at least Ponzi schemes, each single one of them.
And then reimagining value, reimagining capital itself. Because in the end, like even if you've got something like spiritual capital and social capital and cultural capital that you're looking at, in the end, just the fact of labeling those abstractions as capital demands that capital, that capital, even spiritual capital, that capital is something that's used to leverage, the value adding onto nature through labor.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That capital must be leveraged to have labor acting upon the landscape, acting upon nature in some way in order to add value to that, enough for the subsistence of the worker, and then beyond that into this, surplus value that's created, because that's the reason for having capital in the first place. That's why capital exists, is to create that surplus of value. So are there surpluses of spiritual?
No, there are.
You know what I mean? What's the surplus created through spiritual capital? What's the surplus created through cultural capital?
Well, the beautiful thing is that just this exercise, just because you cannot even quantify 5 of those, you can only qualify them on a subjective level, or quantify them on a subjective level. That leads this entire notion of counting capital ad absurdum if you count in that these are relevant parts of your life, right?
Yeah.
And now you can suddenly not count relevant parts of your life. That gets you thinking. And there's a very nice story that Bernard Lietaer describes. Do you know Bernard by any chance? No.
I don't think so, but I've been Dunbaring so much lately. I've lost a lot of names.
Oh,
I think it's an irony that I'm about to expand my network by including like Dunbar himself, and at some stage I might
Dunbar.
that I have to Dunbar. Yeah,
that would be fun.
You stole my punchline, you bastard. That's why you're always going to have a tagline ready to go, just in case somebody jumps in. But I didn't have one.
Oh, next time.
Yeah.
But so
I guess you just Tyson.
That's a good one. That's a really
yeah.
I love it.
Nice.
So
there's the tagline right there. I knew there'd be one. All right, go.
Bernard used to be the head of the central bank in Belgium, and he was also one of the architects of the introduction of the euro. And through all of these processes, he really, really understood how sick all of those systems are. And he went on to go back to academia and learn more about that stuff, but also in very practical terms, think about the design of currencies to create positive emergencies. And he's been writing a lot of books about this. He passed away 2 or 3 years ago. And I bumped into him in 2003 in a meeting, and he blew my mind, and he started explaining all of that stuff to me. And one of his stories, and I think he's put that into a book as well. One of his stories is about this suburb in the US where this retired teacher was so bored that he started coming up with a currency, local currency, time-based local currency. And he got laughed at for a couple of years, and then they started adopting it. And what happened over the course of several more years was that they learned that what goes around comes around. So they stopped counting. They didn't need that currency anymore because it was just a bridge technology to learn that if they put in whatever they can put in, they will get back from the system.
Right.
And that's beautiful. And that is what's kind of like guiding this thinking, saying if you change, as you say, if you change the story, if you change the narrative around what capital actually is, you might see through these shackles it puts on so many people, and actually see it as a system of everything that goes around comes around.
I think Hitler did something like that in early days. But it's good we've got someone else to cite now, because you can't cite Hitler for that.
Why? What did he do?
Didn't you have like 3 currencies going at once at the start there, and was doing the same action that you just described to me?
No, I think there is an experiment in during the Nazi regime in Wörgl. Wörgl was a little town in Austria, and they discovered that they didn't have enough budget to fix everything they needed to fix.
Right.
So what the mayor did, he backed the a local currency with the little bit of federal currency he had.
Right.
And he convinced all of the local economy to accept that currency. And then suddenly that local economy was super thriving. And then what the Nazi regime in Berlin did, they went in there and they prohibited that because it undermined their power. Because
that's good to have that proper story, because I keep hearing people, well, not hearing them completely, because there's something that shuts down. A lot of these ones, you find a few in the sense making community of like, well, we have to have the conversation, and it's just a conversation, but Hitler did some things right. He had a lot of things right. And you're like, I'm not ready to have that conversation just yet, but
I don't know
you
what
have fun.
I don't know what he has right or had right.
No, but that's one of the things they talk about. Like they talk up like that was his idea or something. So that's good to know the proper story there, because it just didn't sound like the sort of thing that he'd be into.
No, of course not. I mean, at the same time, the same thing happened in the US, by the way.
Oh yeah.
Or before that, actually. So when the Great Depression happened, local currency started popping up, and that was undermining the central power. So they prohibited all of those as well. And that is to me one of the, if done right, one of the great promises of the distributed systems, that we can have these that we can localize the power, that we can take build our own economies in a local way, but we can also have them distribute, or we can move our assets to somewhere else if we decide to move.
Yeah.
So combine the best of both worlds, but it has to be done right. And yeah, that's what I'm hoping for.
Oh, you're doing some really good thinking in that space. Yeah, it's really good. Have you talked much to Mike and Yuvi?
No, not at all. I don't know them.
Future,
What are they?
future thinkers.
Yeah.
We have Megan and I have had a yarn with them in the past. So they're putting together. They got their land now, and they're actually putting
they?
together a proto bee.
Yeah.
And they had a they've had a podcast, and got all the usual suspects they've had on there, Schmachtenberger, and
Yeah. I
everybody.
listen to their podcast periodically.
Oh, okay,
And
yeah.
Jim
Oh man,
updates me
they should
on the
talk to
Proto B
you.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I reckon they get a lot out of yarning with you. I think you're doing some really good thinking
Thank you, man.
in here. That's and but not with too much certainty, which is refreshing. Like a lot of people speak with a lot of certainty.
Well,
Yeah.
this, we can never be certain. I like Mark Andreessen in this. With his, what he has on his Twitter bio? He says, strong views, weakly held.
Nice.
And that is important. I mean, we have to say, okay, I think for the moment, I think this is right. But if you convince me otherwise, then I'll think something else is right. And so I think that's an important notion that we have to adopt.
Nice.
Man.
Well, I can hear Megan moving around. She's got an event starting up now too.
Yeah.
Like, poor thing's got to work until about 2 o'clock in the morning.
Oh shoot. Okay.
So I'm just gonna go and make sure she's got enough to eat and that the babies aren't waking up and ruining her thing.
All right. Hey man, thank you so much for your time. Super much appreciated.
Really, really good yarn.
Thank you.
You're ruining my Dunbarring here. It's just you've just put me back a week in my Dunbarring activities with this connection.
Sorry, man.
But yeah. All right. Well, we'll talk again soon.
We will.
Yeah.
Have a good evening.
Really good to see you again. All right.
Yeah.